Welcome to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 18. To begin with some technical matters, some of you have been writing and asking if you can watch and view these episodes, not in its entirety, but only section by section. So please know that every archive, obviously not when it's live, but every archive is time-stamped by subject. So you can actually go to that, click on the subject, look in the description under the video, and you can find exactly the subject you want. It will go right to that space, or that time stamp, as they say, of that area. That's number one. Number two, there are those that want to write questions. Please write them to meaningfullife.com/MyLifeLive. These are completely anonymous. If you want in some way to personally contact me without anonymity, or even with anonymity, but my personal email address is simon@meaningfullife.com. And finally, I want to announce that due to the popularity of MyLife, we'll be doing a special edition tomorrow night, Monday night, for a seminary girl edition, for girls from 17 to 20. Any questions that are specifically geared to them, you can just submit them to the same form that I just announced, and just say it's for the seminary edition. So tomorrow night, this will be a broadcast. Obviously, anyone can watch it, but it's going to particularly focus on subjects and issues addressed by that age group. And the Mitzvah Hashem, in the future we will be doing other special editions for different age groups and for different segments of the population. Okay. Thank you again for all your comments, your warm comments, your positive critique, your negative critique. Everything is welcome. And as we said, nothing is off limits. Please share your questions. And it's really become a very dynamic experience for myself as well, both in the research and the sharing and the feedback and so on. So this week we have a special good new few questions, as well as covering some topics of the past. But I'll begin with something new, because it's something that I wanted to cover in the past few weeks, but every class, every episode has ended up filling up the whole time, and I couldn't get to it. So I want to start with that. And that is the issue of davening, prayer, Avodas HaTefilah. So it's a question that many of us have, because we learn in Chassidus, you learn the Maimorim, you learn the Shlichus, how fundamental Avodas HaTefilah is to all of Chassidus. And yet, we don't see a focus on it, definitely not an emphasis. So many wonder, what is the role of Tefillah? So let me read a few questions, and we'll address this somewhat, I won't say controversial, but definitely a topic that is fraught with all kinds of opinions, and try to make a little seder, a little order here, based, of course, on the Rebbe's words and not on just on speculation. So here's the question number one about prayer. I've read a lot about personal prayer, his Boidedus, in another Chassidus. It seems normal and natural to do this. Is there a place for this in Chabad Chassidus? Is it encouraged? I feel truly close to Hashem when I practice this, even for a short time. Thank you. Another questioner asks, this is a question about personal prayer. Is it important to have a personal conversation with Hashem? Is this something that Chabad Chassidus encourages? I was always under the impression that Avodas HaTefilah is in reference to the 3 communal prayers that we pray every day. In Yeshiva, we were never taught to turn to the Eibishter in times of distress and ask him for help. The third questioner. Though in earlier generations we read and we hear the stories about Chassidim who davened under a talis for hours upon hours, we don't really see this practice encouraged in our time. In Yeshiva, many of the students who tried to daven were often mocked by saying that they're an einrednish, they're self-deceiving, they're hypocrites, and so on. What happened with this Avodas HaTefilah? What did the Rebbe say about this matter? And on, similar questions. It's an excellent question, because let's go back to the beginning. This isn't just a matter of Chassidus. Everyone learns in Pirkei Avos, the end of Pirkei Avos, Perek Aleph, end of the first chapter, Al Shleisha Dvarim Ha'ela Meimed, 3 pillars that the world stands on. Teira, Aveda, Milas Chasadim. Teira is learning Teira. Milas Chasadim, is Chesed, acts of Chesed, includes all the mitzvahs. And then there's Aveda. Aveda Zud Tefillah. Aveda was the Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash in the times of the temple, was the offerings, the karbanos, and Tefillah became karbanos. Tikkunim today, it's prayer. So this is foundational. It's not just some type of footnote or option. Chassidus obviously took it to an entire different dimension as many things Chassidus did. Was not mechadish a new mitzvah, God forbid, or a new concept. It took something and explained how one davens. And you have that. Rebbe Rashab has a kuntas HaTefilah, he has a kuntas Avodas HaTefilah, all based on a Gemara. Avodas Shebelev. What is service of the heart? Zuhi Tefillah. This is prayer. So the Gemara categorizes prayer as service of the heart. You learn a little in more Chassidus. Chassidus talks about the different sections of prayer. And I'm talking primarily Shachris right now. And even every day. We'll soon get to Shabbos and so on. That the prayer is compared to a sulam. Sulam mutzav artzav v'reisha megia shemaima. Like a ladder which rests on the ground, and its top of the ladder, the head of the ladder, scales the heavens. The dream of Yaakov. And we're told that this ladder had 4 rungs. And the 4 sections in davening correspond to these 4 rungs. There are different ways the 4 sections are explained, but generally it's Birchus HaShachar, the morning prayers before Psukkah de Zimra, then comes Psukkah de Zimra, rung number 2. Birchus Krishma Shema, sometimes broken as 2, but often as 1, and Shemoneh Esrei are the 4 rungs. And Chassidus explains at length how each rung is a journey into another level, the 4 levels of the soul, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya. We say in the morning, Neshama shenesata b'ta'eri, ata barasa, ata yitzarta, ata nefachta bi. And it's a whole journey, it's a whole experience. Everybody knows the story with the Maggid. The Maggid had a chaver when they were earlier, before the Maggid became a Talmud, a student of the Baal Shem Tov. He had a chaver who studied Kabbalah with him. The Rebbe told the story many times. One that stands out was Shabbos Bereshis, the first Fabrengen, Tov Shemem Aleph. There were 2 Fabrengens because of the Simchas Torah was Thursday, Friday, and Shabbos. At the end of the first Fabrengen, the Rebbe told the story at length. And what's the story? That the Mekubal, his chaver, came to see the Maggid years later. Now the Maggid had become a great leader at that point. The Alter Rebbe's teacher and the teacher of so many of the Gdeli Chassidim then, each establishing their own dynasty. And he sees that the Maggid davens longer than everybody after the whole minyan. He continues to daven. After he waits till he finishes, after he finishes davening, he goes over to the Maggid and says Shalom Aleichem. They remembered each other. He says, Maggid, we learned together. We learned the Avodas HaTefilah, we learned Kabbalah, we learned all these things. And I daven, it doesn't come close to the length of your davening. The Maggid asked him, what do you do today? So he says, today he's a seicher. What does he do for Parnasa? He learns, but what does he do for Parnasa? He's a seicher. He travels a few times a year to Leipzig, to the marketplace, buys material, then sells it to local merchants, or his wife sells it to merchants. And that way he's mefarnes atzmei and b'nei beisei. He supports himself and his family all year round. The rest of the time he can sit and learn and daven. So the Maggid says to him, let me ask you something. How long does it take you to travel to the Leipzig? He says, it's a whole journey. I have to pack up, I have to prepare myself, I have to find a place to stay. I stay there for a month or 2. He says, why do you have to waste so much time? Why don't you just sit at home and be mizbeinen, meditate? How you would be traveling to Leipzig, how you buy the material, how you come back and unpack the material and then sell it. So the Chaver says to Maggid, you're a batlin. You're not practical. Why am I not practical? Because I need the scheda, we need the material. But me to sit and meditate and contemplate and imagine an illusion what me traveling and this is very nice. I'll have material in my illusionary mind. To actually have the scheda, davon gehen dort and davon fahren. You have to actually go there. The Maggid looked at him and said the same thing as with davening. To go there takes time. It would be very nice to just sit and quickly meditate. Since you need the material, it takes time. And those are the hours and hours of Avodas HaTefilah. One of many, many stories that captures the fundamental principle of Tefillah. Teira is Avodas HaMeach. You learn with your mind. Tefillah is Avodas HaLev, as the Gemara says. It's emotional work, not just intellectual work. And as such, it's a fundamental piece. So what the question only is amplified, what is the Derech HaChabad today? Now, what you could argue, just to play devil's advocate, even though we don't believe in the devil, there's the idea that today, because of Pekuach Nefesh, which means the threatening of the spiritual life of so many Jews due to assimilation and so on, it's Deicha Kol HaTeira Kula. as such, if people were spending time davening all day, what about all the Jews out there in burning buildings that are lacking education, lacking awareness, lacking commitment, unaware, ignorant of it all? So you could say, Pekuach Nefesh Deicha. In the older generations, that wasn't necessarily Pekuach Nefesh. There were other challenges. So the main work was Kshet Atzmacha, to work with yourself. But is that a sufficient answer? The fact of the matter is, Tefillah is still a pillar. So you could answer and say, that like it is with mitzvah, Esek b'mitzvah, potem min ha-mitzvah. When a person is busy doing a mitzvah, they're absolved of doing another one, as the Rogatchover explains and the Rebbe explains, because the mitzvahs are all Ratzon Elyon, they're all part of one Ratzon. So even though each mitzvah does its particular role, but there's something that connects them all. So when you're doing one, in a sense, the other one is also being accomplished through this mitzvah. You may be lacking the particular birur and refinement, which is why Reichudul v'Shaychud, there's this whole sugi in Zohar, the Chassidus talks about that he was missing the mitzvah of Krishma, even though he went for something more important, Rabbi Menuna Saba. Nevertheless, because Kamanda Ovid Le'amaninu, bottom line, you're missing the actual mitzvah. But to say that there's a real void, a prohibition, God forbid, because this mitzvah absolved of that. So you could argue that Pekuach Nefesh takes away or fulfills that which Tefillah would have done. Now there is yesh dvarim b'zgei, which means there is a svara, there is an argument to say this. The Rebbe brings from Teira Eir and Eira Teira that when you give tzedakah is nasa moiche v'liboy zakin elef pam kacha. That when you learn, when you give charity, it makes your learning and your davening 1,000 times more successful. And the Rebbe says it's not a guzma. It means that which could have accomplished with 1 hour, that which would have taken 1,000 hours to accomplish, you can now accomplish in 1 hour. So you could say in that 1 hour of davening, you have all that power because of the tzedakah that you're helping other Jews. All this is fine and good, but still lacking the question, what about the nitzchis of Kuntras HaTefilah? What about the eternity of the Rabbeim's words about the power of Avodas HaTefilah? So there are others that answer that generationally we see that we are all part of historical accumulation. Nonas al gaba anok, we're like midgets that stand on the shoulders of giants. So you can say each generation has its so-called birur, and accumulatively, altogether, will refine the world and bring Mashiach. So being the Chassidus explains on Pi Kabbalah that the whole history is like Kitzir Kema Adam. History is like structured, like a structure of a human being. Adam Arishan was like the head. The earlier generations were working with their Deya, the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu. Their main thing, their level of Deya, an enlightened generation. Their Das was on the highest level. As they worked downward, especially in the time of the Beis HaMikdash, the Ikar Aveda was Midas. And you could say that continued for a while. We are an Ikvis of the Mashiach, we are the end, the Ekev. Ekev is the heel of history, the heel of Mashiach as well. So our Aveda is primarily, like he says in Tanya, mitzvah tzedakah, sukkah, tovid, nafelas. In other words, to pick things up on a Maisa level, on an action level. So you can say that Tefillah belongs more in the generations where there was more Avedas Hamidus, even Avedas Hamechen, Avedas Shebelev. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist today. God forbid, just like it says in many places that though the Yisachar and Zvulun have a partnership, Yisachar does the learning, Zvulun supports him with tzedakah. It doesn't mean Zvulun is absolved of study, and doesn't mean Yisachar is absolved of work and charity. They both have to do both. Question is, what's priority? What's the shara, as the Rebbe often says, the gate through which the others go? So you can argue that today, in Ikvus of the Mashiach, the Rebbe actually has a sikha where he says the main Aveda today is learning Chassidus with your mind and Maisa B'Peil and implementing it in Malchus. And the Eibishter, Kodesh Baruch Hu Mitzarfa, Machshava Teva, Lamaisa, that he already combines and fills in the gaps. However, I must say that all these answers, even though they can be used as an explanation, and they are brought in Sikhs, and I'm bringing it from many different places, at the end of the day, you cannot say that the Rebbe, and God forbid, in any way diminished the power of it, of prayer. The Rebbe's bracha to Bocher Merev Yom Kippur would always include the bracha for Avodas HaTefilah. He used the word Avodas HaTefilah. Now, obviously, everything is in context and everything in perspective. So the bottom line is, when you look in the letters and the sikhs of the Rebbe, though I did not find the Rebbe addressing this in a most blatant way of saying there's some type of shinui or there's a change of generations, what comes out from all the different places is that Avodas HaTefilah is as relevant today as ever. However, you have to take in consideration the factors that I mentioned, all the factors that I mentioned. And it would be, there's no question, absolutely acceptable, more than acceptable, and should be encouraged in yeshivas, not just in yeshivas, but also even younger light, to absolutely start davening. However, davening is an art, in many ways a lost art. Learning, using the mind, is relatively easier. You sit down, a good mind, you stimulate it, and so on. Avodas HaLev is emotional growth, emotional maturity. And let's be honest, as I've discussed many times, we have far more intellectual intelligence than we have emotional intelligence. So davening is actually working your heart. What's the difference? Someone sits down and davening. If you read Untitled Chapter and Untitled Aveda, the Rebbe Rashab makes it clear. Davening is not sitting down and learning the Biyurim of Chassidus in davening. That's the learning before you start davening. Davening is actually the emotional exertion, Aveda Shebelev. It's learning to emote with God, learning to emote with your soul, and ultimately will spill over in how you emote with other people. And that has a power that Torah does not have. Torah can train your mind, it can align you. Torah prepares you for prayer. Misayeh, it says in Chassidus, it empowers prayer. But prayer is the actual journey, like I said in the story of the Magid, of traveling step by step and to get the Shecheda itself. Which means, what does it mean? Arbet mitzich. This, unfortunately, is not focused enough. To work on yourself. And working yourself means being able to sit down, if it's a bocher without a talis, a younger man with a talis, and seeing prayer as a tool to speak to God, to emote, to connect your emotions, to yearn, to have a shtrebung, to have a dorsht, a thirst, a yearning for the divine. Obviously, with Chassidus teaches you, when you know, first, you know what Ruchnius is, what Elokus is, what the worlds are, then it's far easier to read the davening and know each part of davening is taking you on a journey to that place, to that silas within you, to the bria within you, to the yitzira in you, the asiya within you. I said the 4 rungs actually go the other way around, from asiya climbing to atzilus. So the first thing you need to know, how do you translate asiya in your emotional level? How then do you translate yitzira on an emotional level? How do you translate bria on an emotional level? How do you translate atzilus? So it comes down to really an emotional, gut-wrenching Aveda, that if you really apply yourself, is not reading words. The words capture the idea. The words is the keli for it. But Avodas HaTefilah is the regesh shebelev that's within the words, not just lip service. So what I suggest, humbly, that we need to create a new Avodas HaTefilah club, so to speak. People who will, first of all, be taught and trained how you daven. We have plenty of time for all kinds of narishkeit and shtusim. So to say that we have no time today because we're busy all the time with Avodas HaKedesh, yeah, if somebody is busy 24/7 on a level of pekuach nefesh, obviously it's deicha kala teira kula. Not only tefillah. We're not talking about that. We have plenty of time. The problem is we're not taught how to do it. We don't see it as teyelis. Now that doesn't mean it has to be done shalei l'shma just to benefit you, but it is an art. And unfortunately, our yeshivas are not focusing on it. Here's not the place and the time to go through the whole process. Frankly, I also need to learn the art. I'm the last person to speak about this lost art of prayer. But I know there's an art, and they know the power of it. And there's no question it would make us far more refined people if we had the limud Chassidus followed by the Avodas HaTefilah. Everyone on their level. The way to begin is like always, tafasta merubah tafasta, to have people like Gershon Ber Paharer and others who sat 6 hours and able to go on this type of journey, or other Chassidish Yidden, begin with one prayer. Take one tefillah. Let it be Shema. Let it be Baruch Shamar. Learn a piece of Chassidus on it. What does Echad mean? There's all types of interpretations. Yichud Mamayla Lamata, Yichud Mamata Lamayla, Mamayla Lamata, Mata Lamayla. Baruch Shamar has all kinds of pirushim. There's a whole Siddur im Dach from the Mittler Rebbe. Piyurim from the Alter Rebbe on Siddur. You have to learn slowly, not all of it, not haskoladik, and say, I'm going to daven with this nekuda. One nekuda. Something all of us can begin doing. And with the focus of Aveda Shebelev. We're not talking about sitting and contemplating. It's not about his bodedus, it's not about meditation. It's his bonanus. And then reading the words, Pirush HaMilas, and understanding these words are taking you for an emotional journey into your soul and into the cosmos. So, bottom line, is Avodas HaTefilah relevant today? Absolutely. Is it the primary number one Aveda? Number one Aveda, as we shall soon discuss, is what the Rebbe told us, what the mitzvahs hadar is, what this generation Shlichus is, etc. But is it part of it? Just like Limud HaTefilah, Limud Chassidus, and all pnimis dika things have much more impact than when you just do action. So even Avodas HaShlichus, even when you're busy working in the Rebbe's Mivtzayim, or other things like this, Avodas HaTefilah, it enriches it with emotional power, just like Avodas HaTefilah enriches it with intellectual power. Personal prayer, when, where, and how. I hope to, in the future episodes, dedicate more time to talk about what this art of prayer exactly is. But the beginning, first step is to take one tefillah and take it seriously, teach our children to take it seriously, because ultimately how we educate our children, that's how we will, our attitude to davening will be. And there's nothing wrong being able to work on yourself in that type of fashion. So b'meila, it is absolutely relevant to our generation. Are there changes? Yes, we're not learning in Lubavitcher, where people had the ability and opportunity to daven perhaps in that type of way, but there's no reason that we shouldn't have the version of 21st century type of tefillah. It maybe take on a little different shape, but it can fit. We have the time, and especially Shabbos, when Kol Malata Chasuya and a person doesn't go to work, definitely have the time. Just a matter of discipline, of educating ourselves and others in the value of it and how to do it ultimately. And of course, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur Nishtavas Serein is obviously the ultimate Avodas HaTefilah because of the length of the prayers, the length of time we're in shul, and so on. So let's move on to another subject. This is a follow-up to approaching teachers with expectations, and they don't see them living up to standards that we think they should live up to. Here we go. Your response, this goes back to episode number 16, 2 weeks ago. Your response about the tznius teacher was very disappointing. Just to refresh myself and everyone, I said then about a parent who was saying that they come to the school and they don't see a teacher living up to the standards of tznius that our community should have. So my response was essentially talking about not being critical and learning to educate people through love and respect and so on. And if you have criticism, find a way to reach that teacher privately or in a discreet manner instead of confrontational and critique. So this questioner has a problem with my response. Your response about the tznius teacher was very disappointing. To attempt to transfer this responsibility to the parent is both wrong and ineffectual. Parents expect to receive a certain type of education promised and promoted by the local schools. Both the administration and teachers are paid to do a job. It's their job to do it. If the teacher is failing to follow the tznius guidelines issued by the school itself, the principal has an obligation to address and correct the problem. The Rabbeim clearly told us that we should get melamdim for our children that are the most Chassidish and Yiddish Shemayim as possible. All the local schools claim to provide such a service. If they fail, whose responsibility is it? A parent and principal are not the same. One is getting paid to run a school, which includes choosing and overseeing the teachers. Presumably she was chosen because she has qualifications to fill such a position. Moreover, the mother is not criticizing the woman's tznius, she's criticizing the circumstances that this woman is employed to teach her daughter. That is a legitimate complaint. Let the woman with wardrobe challenges get another job that does not place the burden of educating the new generation on her shoulders. Teaching is melechas hakedesh, not simply another way to make some money. Halavai, the teachers would get paid the money. That's my own little footnote here. If a mesivta would hire a man that cannot learn Gemara to teach my son Gemara, do I need to teach this man how to learn Gemara? If a kohen doesn't know how to do the Aveda, or knows but is just lazy or negligent, in the Beis Hamikdash, do we just let him serve anyways? I hope you see my point. And I hope you see that I'm not censoring your words, and I'm not concerned with being criticized. And let's just go back to question 3, which takes where you left off, a similar critique. Regarding tznius teachers, I felt that your answer was unfair and off the mark. Maybe it was the same person writing, maybe not. You spent an inordinate amount of time talking about not judging others. This question was about hypocrisy in the school system and teachers undermining chinuch by publicly transgressing halacha, a very serious matter indeed. What does the don't judge line get pulled out? Why does the don't judge line get pulled out when it concerns tznius? The Rebbe made it quite clear that skirts must cover the knees when seated. Why is it that I've seen a Limudei Kodesh teacher sitting, and I don't want to continue the sentence. I was embarrassed not just for her, but for a community who has such Limudei Kodesh teachers. And yet you focus on not judging. Why is it that I see news items on a Chabad website with Lubavitcher women's? Again, I don't want to finish the sentence. Perhaps it is because of the culture in which judging is considered the worst sin of all, far worse than transgressing Shulchan Aruch. Rather than hearing you emphasize not judging, I would have preferred to hear you concentrate on the most effective way of ridding our communities of this scourge of immodesty. I apologize for the harsh tone here. However, the immodesty plague must be dealt with and not by castigating those who care. Okay, so I've given equal time to this, I would say, I don't call it a diatribe, but at least the critique of my focusing on judgment. And let me respond the following. How shall I put this? In Chassidus, it talks about people who line up to punish others when they're doing something wrong. There's a whole Maimon in Derech Mitzvah where he talks about the levushei of a kohen, the garments that a kohen has to wear, that can't be too long. So the question is, why not? It's a holy garment, big day Kodesh, let it be too long. When you wear a garment that's too long, you end up slipping on it. In Kodesh, you have to have everything, not more, not less. And he says in Aveda, that means a person who lines up, when there's something to criticize, they're there first to criticize. So their big Kodesh are very long, but really it's their achzarius and their lack of sensitivity that is really the issue. They just dressed it up in Kedusha. I don't know who wrote these letters, and I don't want to know, but since the letters were written so bluntly, let me say something bluntly in return. We've learned 1,000 times over and over. Al todnas chavere, you shouldn't judge another until you come to their shoes. Havedan kol odin l'kav schus. Who decided exactly what the standards of tznius are? Were you appointed to be the police, tznius police? The Rebbe chose you to be? What do you think the Rebbe would say if you were in Yechidus and you told the Rebbe this? Imagine what the Rebbe would say. Would he be with you? He'd become furious like you and say, listen, this is unacceptable. We have either fired the teacher or threatened this teacher. What do you think the Rebbe's approach would be? I don't even have to answer. It's a rhetorical question. But I'll answer. There's no question that you have to know before you start criticizing, even if it's a completely legitimate critique. Why dafka this? And if you hear someone speaking Lashon Hara or saying things that are hurtful from a teacher, suddenly that's not important. What decides what is an important thing to focus on? Maybe this is a disproportionate focus on tznius when there's so many other issues. Not to take away from the importance of tznius. When you start seeing that that's the only thing we call scourge, maybe that's a symptom, as a matter of fact, of a whole bunch of other things. Who decides these things? So thank God we have a Rebbe. As a matter of fact, one question that asked me about this as well, you said in episode 16, we have a Rebbe, we have Rabbonim, and we have standards that were established in Chabad. And as long as they are sanctioned by the Rabbeim, that is our standard. So no one's here to come make new standards. Now, I don't really know, please tell me what is the edel way to come across the teachers and principals who seem to either not know or not care. I don't really know who appointed anybody to go ahead and measure skirts and come and call this a magefa or a scourge. You may be embarrassed because you go to Borough Park and somebody complains and says, look at Crown Heights, how they dress. As I discussed a number of episodes back, tznius is far more than dress. Tznius is an attitude. It's for men and women alike. It's about standing with dignity before God. Obviously, it has a manifestation only also in chitzenius and how we dress and lengths and so on. But this overemphasis may end up being something that turns more people off than brings them closer. So I repeat again, it's not about not focusing on the tznius. It's about, number one, being sensitive people. I, from my experience, see that when people criticize like this, it usually doesn't end up in good results. Why not? Why are people not listening to you? If you're so adamant and it's coming from Dvarim HaYetzim 11, you care so much, how come you're not able to be mashpia on anyone? The Rebbe says, time and again, if you speak to someone and you're not affecting them, the Rebbe says it means there's something wrong in the way you're communicating it. Do you know this statement from the Rebbe? And it's not once, hundreds of times. How could the Rebbe say that? There's so many things that we criticize and nothing to do with me. The person objectively is doing something wrong. Because the Rebbe says, you want to speak, you want to reach somebody. If you're not reaching them, like the Gemara says, if ears don't hear you, it means you're lacking Yiras Shamayim. So Adarabah, Why don't you approach these teachers the way you think you're approaching them? Let's see if you have an effect. If you have an effect, I'm the first to acknowledge that you were successful and great. If you don't have effect, you have to wonder why. How are you being looked at? Now, since I don't know who this is, I don't want to criticize this person, but you look at the results. The Rebbe, I heard recently a nice story. The Rebbe told somebody who said that, the Rebbe said, "Ich hab kemlich gehet. Kemlich gehet am kem bekarav zan emetzen durch surmara." You can't bring someone closer through surmara, through telling them not to do something bad. You focus on doing something positive. I have a letter in my possession of a man, his name is Dr. Bellin. He gave me a personal letter that Rebbe wrote to him as a gift. He was coming to my classes. And the letter is, he became a Baal Tshuva, Shem Torah Mitzvahs, and he went to shul. In shul, he was sitting near somebody who used to talk during davening, and made him very upset. Here he's a person who's just coming to Yiddishkeit and davening. Why does he have to sit near someone who's speaking all the time? So he wrote a letter to the Rebbe, and writes to the Rebbe, what should I do? One option, I don't come to shul. Another option, I yell at the guy. What should I do? This is the Rebbe's answer. A Lubavitcher type of answer. The Rebbe answers, next time you see him speaking in shul, think to yourself, imagine a Jew, even one who speaks in shul, still wants to come to shul. It's the Rebbe's answer. Like Lubavitcher, the Rebbe could have said to him, hey, you're right. Go over nicely and explain to him how speaking in shul is not a nice thing. Go to the Gabbai, go to the Rov. There's a lot of ways to go in an edler way, obviously not yelling at the guy. Why didn't the Rebbe say that? Because the Rebbe sensed that this person had, and he was right, obviously, had an element of intolerance. Now it was manifesting in davening. Tomorrow it manifests in getting angry at his wife for not polishing his shoes or something. Now, that doesn't mean that the guy is entitled to daven. That guy, the Rebbe didn't say, don't tell him I wrote you a letter and tell him that he should speak. It's an attitude. And I submit here without any hesitation that if we want to correct problems in this community, any community, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And if it's not coming across, it means that maybe you're just sounding critical. It may not even be your intention. You're focusing on this. You're not focusing on other things. And then you hear suddenly somebody who's a big tznius police suddenly do something that's far, far worse. And you find out, hey, this person is just a lowlife. But tznius, there they are yelling and screaming. What effect does that have on our young people? They find out about someone who is such a tznius person that what's going on inside their lives is not such a ay. Again, two wrongs don't make a right. But that's why I focused on not judging. Not because I'm trying to ignore the issue of tznius. I'm talking about how to repair problems. We're looking at how to find solutions, not how to criticize. We all can criticize. Is there anyone out there, anyone sitting in this chair right now that can stand up and say, I am perfect, I have it all worked out? Ridiculous. If you want to look, there's a lot to look at ourselves. Negel that the Rebbe repeats, should be pointed to ourselves, meaning sharp nails. This doesn't mean there isn't room for critique. Even with our own children, you have to find a way to communicate. If your criticism is not falling on deaf ears, rest assured there's something wrong with how you're communicating. Not because that person's a grubber jung and so callous and so insensitive, they can't hear your critique. Now, yes, our schools should have the highest standards of teachers. Absolutely. That's why I said, if you have an issue, go speak to the school. Speak discreetly. It doesn't have to become suddenly posted on websites and blogs and announced. Go speak discreetly if you really care and say, I feel this teacher is a bad influence on my student. Even if the teacher is wearing perfect sneakers, but they behave in a way, yell a lot, or do other things that can be offensive to children. Of course, as parents, we should expect the most from our schools. But our attitude has to be one to fix, not to criticize. Unfortunately, most critique, I say most, is a smokescreen for other problems. And that's what we have to look at and be careful of. And there's many ways to repair things, and this is an attitude. If you feel you want to continue to this polemic and write to me and criticize everything I've said here, feel free to do so. Obviously, I'll have the prerogative to read it or not, but I definitely will read it to me, myself. And that's what I wanted to add as a follow-up to this discussion about speaking to teachers. And frankly, this is about speaking to anyone in any condition. I repeat again Rabbi Schollenberg Gordon's story with the Frierdiker Rebbe, briefly about the Turkish bath. They said to the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he asked him, should I be mechiach, should I criticize people when I see something wrong, even people who know better? The answer was that you have to go like a Turkish bath. First you warm them up, then you elevate them, And then they'll ask you to shmais. They'll ask you that you should spank them, so to speak, out of love. And fine, someone invites you in and says, I want you to be my mashpia. I need some constructive critique, by all means. This doesn't mean that there isn't a mitzvah to find chichiach techiach, especially those that should know better, but it's all about an attitude and a method. And the proof is in the pudding. Let us see the results. Results don't lie. Okay, now we move on to, since we're in the heat of the discussions, we're moving on to the next question, and that is the issue of Lubavitcher, Chassidus. What defines a Lubavitcher? Okay. Is Shlichus the only measure of success in Chabad? And the third question, I want to go on Shlichus but have nowhere to go. This is all part, being that Gimel Tammuz is coming up a month, or more than a month, in 6 weeks. I decided to take on some topics that address that and also help us prepare for Gimel Tammuz. So it's a good question to ask. What is a Lubavitcher? What does the Rebbe want of us? I don't believe this is a topic that can be addressed in one episode, but I'll definitely begin. And I want to just read a few questions that came my way regarding this. My education in the Chabad school primed me to view Shlichus as top-notch, and now I'm just a teacher, quote-unquote. Is chinuch second class? Even more so, as a teacher, do I continue to stress Shlichus as the be-all and end-all when many will not end up as shluchim? Okay. Question number 2. I have an inner need or urge to make money, a lot of money. Is this considered wrong? Growing up in our system with values such as bittul, iskafia, shlichus, mesiras nefesh, to helping another Jew, begashmis and beruchnis, realizing that only Torah mitzvahs have any value, and that wanting to make money comes from the Yetzer Hara and is a waste of time. The pride in Chabad that our young people are not into making money, but just to do the ratzon of the Rebbe, all leaves me feeling very guilty. Perhaps even more, I feel that there's something wrong with me, that I'm so selfish, that I'm not on that level that so many of my friends are, who are selfless and have no need or interest in this. They can go to work on their shlichus in life with money just being a necessary tool to be a goat soldier of the Rebbe. Is spending my life trying to make money for the sake of having money considered wasting the precious life that Hashem gave me? Is this considered being selfish? On one hand, I feel that it is, and how can I do such a thing? And on the other hand, I feel that it's a need that I have. And if I want to find happiness, I need to fill this need. How does one resolve this seeming contradiction between the values that we have been imbued with and this inner need? Okay, let's see. Okay, similar question like the first question, question number 3. I went to Chabad school and now teach in a Chabad school. While in school, I was treated to many Farbrengens and special speakers and graduated with a feeling that Shlichus was it, capital it. But I'm not a shlucha, I'm a teacher, and I feel like a second-class Chabad citizen. My question is, how can our education system set a goal that is unrealistic? There are not enough Shlichus positions or even teaching positions for everyone, and is teaching really option B? And finally, the question, also like a rephrasing of question number 2, is I work in business, I consider myself a Chassid and Lubavitcher, teach my children the Chabad minhagim, send them to Chabad schools. Is there something missing from the Rebbe's perspective in my life? Okay, so this I think is excellent questions regarding, especially as we prepare as we, a few weeks before Gimel Tammuz, and all of us start thinking about the Rebbe more than usual, and what the Rebbe expects of us. So I will tell you the research I've done, which I think is the first place to begin, is how do we answer these questions? I can go on and give you my own thoughts, speculation, which I don't want to do. It's not relevant. Everybody has their own theories. I want to talk what the Rebbe himself says. So thank God we have plenty of literature where the Rebbe speaks about this. And I want to begin by covering some of that literature. As a matter of fact, I will even point out some sikhs that I refer to everyone to read. It's a good homework, and belavach, no matter what, it's great background, great material to address, especially as we coming closer to Gimel Tammuz, as I mentioned. So here is what I want to bring out: the sources that I want to give you are sikhs. Here we are. I'm going to be quoting from some of them, but here's the list that I've so far compiled. I think something very valuable for everyone to look at. Sichas Bereshis Tovshin Yud Daled. Shmini Tovshin Yud Ches. Especially Shmini Tovshin Yud Ches. If you begin with any, begin with that one. Bereshis, Vayetze, and Yud Gimel Tammuz Tovshin Yud Tes. 19th Yud Tes Kislev Tovshin Chof. Simchas Beis HaShe'eva, and the second Bereshis Verbringen and Achron Shal Pesach Tovshin Chof Aleph. Tetzave Pekudei and Masei Tovshin Chof Zayin. Shabbos Chalamoid Sukkos Tovshin Chof Ches. Simchas Teira Tovshin Chof Tes. Chayesora and Vayishlach Tovshin Mem Zayin. Lech Lecha Tovshin Mem Tes. You could always back up and listen to this again if I went too quickly. But these are a series of sichos that the Rebbe lays out what he wants from us. And the best way to answer questions like this is not you have my opinion, you have an opinion, I have my opinion, but rather, what did the Rebbe say? Now, obviously, all this is built on a fundamental axiom, muskulation assumption, that a Lubavitcher Chassid is someone that listens to the Rebbe, someone that follows the Rebbe's guidelines. But that too needs to be put into place. What does that mean? Well, just like Torah, there's a Torah that tells us what we're supposed to do, what we're supposed to not do. Moshe Rabbeinu was the Rebbe of that generation, and every generation there's a Moshe Rabbeinu. So that assumption I'm not even going to here make a case for, because that's a given. If you're asking what is Lubavitcher, you have to answer that question. Now, based on all these sichos that I just said, and many more, and based on some other sources, we know the following. The Alter Rebbe said that Chabad, Lubavitch, he did not want to make a maflega. A maflega is an expression for a party, like Democratic Party, Republican Party. They're parties. There are card-carrying clubs, card-carrying members of a party. That's not what the Alter Rebbe wanted. Chabad Chassidus is a hashkofe. It's a Teira Chassidus. Teira Chassidus, which is part of Kol HaTeira Kula, given at Har Sinai, and revealed in its time to the Baal Shem Tov, and then through Chassidus Chabad, through the Alter Rebbe, in a full-blown Chabad fashion. The whole comprehensive system. This system is for every person on earth. Not just for Jews, not just for Lubavitcher Chassidim, not just for Jews, also for non-Jews. And the Rebbe makes it very clear. Chassidus is for all. Pnimis HaTeira, pending some sections. Even the Pnimis HaTeira about mitzvahs, the Rebbe has sichos that speak. The ruchnius of it can be explained to everybody. Everybody on their level. So we're talking about something which is, frankly, for 7 billion people on this earth. The fact that it didn't reach them all doesn't make them not part of the club. It means that we didn't do our job. But the message, the Torah of Chassidus, is meant for all. There's some people say, what are you talking about? How could you say such a thing? Akum Shalom Torah, etc., etc. Well, open up a Rambam, open up the Psukim that the Rambam brings, the Sof Hilchos Malachim. Lo yi ye'esa kol ha'elam el dasas Hashem bolvad. Kol ha'elam, the whole world will only be involved to know God. What is knowing God exactly? That's Chassidus. Chassidus talks about knowing God. Kimola oretz de'es Hashem kamayim layam mechasim. Then he goes on. Yisrael, Jews will be chachamim and all that he describes there. But it's very clear. Chaviv adam shenivra b'tzelem. It's another discussion about our attitude to the larger world. And bottom line is, however, Molod is Deis Hashem. Chassidus, Chabad, yes, for all people. That immediately tells you this is not a party. You know, a party, doesn't matter, is for a group that have to have certain criteria to fit into it. So if you want in the broadest sense of the word, Lubavitch Chassidus, you could say is really for everybody. So some people will say, one second, so what's our Nash? What are Tmimim? What are Chassidim? Is everybody a Chassid? Well, Rabbi Chadikov used to tell people that every person on earth, every Jew on earth is a potential Chassid. I still will discuss this, because obviously there are levels. But I wanted to begin with the most fundamental piece of all, and that is what Lubavitch came to do. If you look at these sichos that I referred to, the Rebbe makes it very clear that there's a Shlichus of our generation is that people should do whatever is possible to reach other Jews and other people, their sphere of influence, and bring them closer to Yiddishkeit Elikus through Chassidus. That's the mantra. That's the motto. The words that the Mashiach said to the Baal Shem Tov, Yefutzu, 3 words. spreading the well springs outward. Now, everyone who learned even the Aleph Beis of Yiddishkeit and Chassidus knows that your neshama came down to this earth for a reason, right? We are blessed with a Rebbe that tells us what that reason is. So a person writes here, he has a taiva, he wants to make money. Other person is in business. I'm not here to criticize anyone's choices. Everybody makes their choices. But if you want to know what the Rebbe wants, just look at what he says. Without any bias, without any subjectivity, look at what he says. And I have to make now a big distinction between people who are already in a situation and people who are not yet. What I mean by that is, bochrim and young women and men who are not yet made decisions in their lives, what they're going to be doing, what career, what job, what work, what shlichus, etc. So all options are before them. Someone who b'ashgacha pratis after the fact has already made a choice to either go into business or to go into chinuch or to go into some type of other thing, whatever they're doing. I'm not here to tell you to quit your job or do something else. If you open up the Shlichus of the Rebbe and you see that what you're doing is not aligned with what you think is your potential, that's your choice. But it's a big difference after the fact and before the fact. And you see how the Rebbe treated people. So when you look at these Shlichus that I had described, and many, many more, what did the Rebbe want from his people? Lechatchila, not after the fact. You're now a bocher 18 years old. You're a young woman 19 years old, 18 years old. You're still in school or finishing school. And you have all the choices before you. What would the Rebbe want you to do? In these Shlichus, it's clear, unequivocally clear, that to recognize the purpose why your soul came down to this earth. And your soul did not come down to this earth to open up a successful business. Your soul came down to this earth to achieve something that only you can achieve. You were given strengths to help make this world a better place. Adira b'tachteinu. So, but first and foremost, you ask, what is a Lubavitcher, what is a Chassid? Someone that lives up to and accepts the Shlichus that Hashem gave us in this world. And the Rebbe is a Shliach of Hashem to tell us what that Shlichus is. That's unarguable. To say that you follow Chabad customs, you have a picture of the Rebbe on the wall, and you're singing Lubavitcher Negunim, and you eat Lubavitch type of cholent, if there's such a thing, is very nice and good, but it's not the kavonis yiddish and neshama b'guf. Obviously, once we're down here, you do a lot of other things. The famous story to Rab Mordechai HaTzadik. What did the Baal Shem Tov say to Hayem Yem? And a neshama comes down below to live 70, 80 years. What? Just to do a favor for a Jew. Not to put on tefillin, not to eat kosher, not to do anything else. Once you're here, you're mechuyev and obligated to do the rest. But your neshama came down to do a favor. We just don't know what favor it is. So that's what we have to be busy searching for. We have from the Rebbe even more than that. He told us what the Shlichus Hador is. You look at the Sikha of Vayishlach Tov Shemem Zayin. Chayesora Tov Shemem Zayin, I quoted that. Shlichus Hador, everyone on Islam, without exception. And the Rebbe makes it very clear, it's for every man or woman of this generation, without exception. So some people say, well, the Rebbe told me to go into business. The Rebbe gave somebody a personal Eirah. I'm not here to comment on that. The Alter Rebbe told someone to become a Balagola. Obviously, if you have a direct Eirah. But look into your heart and actually ask yourself if you actually have one or you convince yourself you have one for your own for your own so-called conscience. These are the Shlichus of the Rebbe. Again, I speak now to all of us here that have the choices before us. Now you make all your choices. You want to know what the Rebbe wants? Open up the Shlichus that's plentiful. And more than what I've said, I mentioned some of them. In Shmini Tovshin Chai, I would like to if I had the time, I'd read the whole Sikha just here. That's how important it is. It talks about this mamish kipshute mamish in the most direct possible way. He brings there the words from the Arizal. The Arizal wants an Erev Shabbos, Friday afternoon, Kabbalah Shabbos, they were davening in the fields. And the Arizal says to the students, let's go to Yerushalayim. And some of the students said, we have to go and ask our wives. The Arizal heard that. He said, okay, we're not going to go. Which means it was time for Mashiach and Geula. Once he saw that, we're not going to go. The Rebbe asks a very basic question. What's wrong with asking your wife? Shalom Bayis is such a foundation in Yiddishkeit. God says, erase my name for Shalom Bayis. Because it's possible that the Shalom Bayis, asking your wife, should hold up the Geula. And you have to hear the Rebbe's answer. The Rebbe doesn't say whole beard. He says, alles gut and fine, sa cheshbon, take, asking your wife. Later he speaks about asking your parents. Kibud aveim. It's all fine and good, but it has nothing to do with going to war. When you go to war, you have to just listen. The Rebbe says that's al pi pnimius senyon. Now penigla, how taka could the Arizal expect them not to go to speak to their spouses? Al pinigla, it's very simple. The Arizal was a bal halacha, a mumche, an expert, a godel in nigla just as in pnimius hatera, and he knew these dinim, and still he felt that way. So his kashas to them should have realized and relied that the Arizal would not ask them to do something that's inappropriate. But because the kashas wasn't there, even the Arizal himself didn't end up going. He talks at length about going, dafke those that don't want to go, the ones have to go on Shlichus. Then the Rebbe continues and says, at the end of the day, what happened? They didn't go. The Arizal didn't go off on his own. He went back to the same Talmidim. Why? Because he went back to take care and educate them, to prepare them to one day when they have to grow up and do what they have to do. So the Rebbe speaks about Rachmanis, the compassion the Rebbe has for those that even if they end up not doing what they should have done, in the fullest sense of the word, he's still there with them. He doesn't give up on them. It's very fascinating sikh. You have to read it. Shmini Tov Shen Chai. And many more like it. So, without kidding ourselves, it's all nice to pat ourselves in the back and try to minimize. The bottom line is, yes, a Rebbe gekumen de Zelnuns, favos de Nusham is a gekumen de Olamata. I say it in Yiddish, I'll say it in English. A Rebbe came to tell us why our souls came down here below. As a shliach of the Eibishter. Gales dvari the seidei the Avodah HaNeviim. He revealed his secrets to his servants, his prophets. The Rebbe came to tell us that. If that is not the criteria for Lubavitcher Chassid of listening to what the Shlichus, I'm not talking about a detail. The Rebbe says that a person should miftzat film, or the Rebbe said about to be mahadin and hareini makabel, or learning Rambam. These are details. The Rebbe gave us the klolos hakavana, why you're here. Now let's broaden the word shlichus. You may think, okay, well, what's the problem? Here's the question number 2. That's all fine and good. There's nowhere to go. The territory has been divided, as some people say. You can't find a place to go on shlichus. So first of all, let's broaden the word shlichus. Yiridas hanasham baguf. What are you saying? That only a few thousand people have a mission and the rest don't have a mission? Shlichus has many meanings, and the broadest sense of the word, it means to be completely dedicated to Yifutzamay Nesecha Chutza of the Rebbe, of Chassidus, of Teres of Chassidus. There are many ways to do it. There are ways to go actually to a city. There are ways to do it today on the internet and other ways. There are many ways to do it. If a person really felt that the Rebbe called you in and said, this is the reason your soul came down to earth, trust me, we'd find a way. As far as territory goes, yes, Chassidim need to get together with a Yishuv Adas and figure out what to do. Because let's just put it very bluntly. There are 4,000 shluchim, so-called official shluchim. Okay, 3,000. There are 14 million Jews Ken Yirbu on earth. Divide 14 million by 4,000, by 3,000. I don't know exact numbers, but it definitely comes down to be numbers that are impossible for any individual shliach to reach. Now there's also 7 billion people on this planet. Let's not forget about that. And the shlichus there is also to reach them. Now divide 7 billion by 4,000. What is it? So let's put it this way. There's plenty to do, and there's so many people to reach. To say that the job is already divided between a few thousand is ridiculous. How it's going to work, how we have to deal with this in a technical matter, fine, I leave that to the bureaucrats. But the bureaucracy should not get in the way of the kavanah, of the intention. Open up the Sikha Vayeshev Tovshin Mem Aleph. I quoted it already a number of times in the past, in this series, and see what the Rebbe says about a Melch Malcham Lochim and how to appoint others and not, God forbid, to stop others. If we're dedicated to the cause, and the cause is not my own mission, but recognizing the goal of changing the world, then there's always ways, my friends. I'm not saying it's always easy. There's going to be competition, kinus sofrin, there's money issues, and so on. But it's very clear that the Rebbe gave the shlichus to our generation. The schus of someone who heard it from the Rebbe is that they heard it directly. So the definition that I see from the Rebbe about what is a chassid, what is a Lubavitcher, is someone who fulfills this mission. The rest is technical. This is what it comes down to. The Rebbe actually says there also, Tovshin Chai Shmini, that yes, it's all fine and good. You could eat Sholent on Shabbos and stay here in Brooklyn. But it's not the war. The battle is not there. The Rebbe uses the word in Russian, godin. You're not roy, you're not worthy of battle. And that's what's required now, a war. And a war, you can't have people going and asking their parents, he says there, and even wives, whether you should go or not go. And there's no way that that can be a contradiction to the mitzvah of kibbudem, the mitzvah of listening of shalom bayis, and so on and so forth. I also want to refer you to a few letters. A few letters where the Rebbe speaks about this. There's someone that writes to the Rebbe, because I wanted to address, and again, I hope I have enough time to address it, at least to some extent, the issue, based on what I said, I broadened the definition of a Lubavitcher Chassid to the whole world, basically. Everyone's a potential. Everyone should be listening to the Nasi Hadar. Yes, I stand by that. However, that doesn't mean there aren't people that have the Shlichus who've been around and actually heard it. There are people who lived and saw the Rebbe, people who heard him, who had the Shlichus to be appointed by him, to speak to him, direct advice. You could say a lot of people never saw him. That still doesn't limit the definition of what a Lubavitcher should be, but there's definitely someone who has far more responsibility who's been in the environment and the sviva and heard. Now, we can go a step further. What about Gezha, as they say? Gezha is someone that has Gezha is like a branch from the tree that comes from the original tree of people who have Chassidic blood in their blood from genes from their parents. So I want to address that as well because it's all part of the picture. But I want to make it very clear that even though you have plenty of sikhs, especially in the previous generations, of focusing on those that were born into it and had it in their blood and had it in their education, have it in their kishkis, as they say. Nevertheless, especially as time passed on, the Rebbe became less and less focused on that and more focused on that everyone has this job. If you go to Lech Lecha, I think I read Lech Lecha Tavshin Mem Tes. Yes, Lech Lecha Tavshin Mem Tes. The Rebbe says very clearly, then the time of the Rebbe Rashab, that before you went out anywhere, you had to study in Temchet Mimim, and there were all kinds of so-called conditions and introductions and prefaces. Today, no introductions are necessary. As soon as you're ready, you go out on a Shlichus and do a work of Yifutza Meinesecha Chutza. I don't believe it's a contradiction. It's change of times and change of needs, but the conditions became far broader than they were once. The quality control, so to speak, you can say. The Alter Rebbe had, we know, a Cheder Rishon and a Cheder Sheni. What is that? Students, Cheder Rishon, were people that had to be Baki and Shas, Poskim, Achser Shenim, Achreinim, Kuzri, Meiravuchim, etc., Ikrim. And Cheder Sheni were people with only the first half of what I just said. The Alter Rebbe, that pretty much excludes, I would say, most of our generation, if not all. The Alter Rebbe. As the generations passed, the conditions became not as extreme. Either because of the times, either because we already established the Yesodis in the earlier generations, however you explain it. Maybe the way the Rebbe explains it, that the darker it gets, the deeper the Giluim of Chassidus has to be revealed, because of the Ben Chela, because when we're missing more, we need more. You can't wait till a person's going to go through all the Hagdomas of Tefillah and Teirah and all that. You got to go do the job, and you learn on the job. Talmidei Yesem Mekulam, all the different explanations. But regardless, you cannot diminish the fact that Ashgacha Pratis, if a person stood in front of the Rebbe and heard the Rebbe speak, definitely has more responsibility than someone that didn't even hear it. The Shlichus is still everybody's. So I found an interesting letter, and I thank those that helped me find them, a letter where the Rebbe speaks about this in the Igros Kodesh. So there's one letter in Yiddish. It's in volume 19, Igros Kodesh. The letter is dated Yudal Kislev Tavshin Chaf. Yudal Kislev Tavshin Chaf, where the Rebbe basically writing to someone who prefaces the letter saying that he's not a chassid. And the Rebbe goes in a long discussion and says to him, and I'll just translate it quickly, but you can read it. It's on page 86 in volume 19 of Igros Kodesh. So the fact that you wanted to justify your expression as ihr seid nicht kein chassid. And right after that you say that your father was a chassid. And the Rebbe goes on, now it's a contradiction of terms, because parents inherit, their children inherit parents' genes and their parents' legacy. And goes on to speak about different types of Chassidim, those that know the Chassidim, those that don't know, those that are still concealed. And he speaks about this in a very powerful way. What you see from this is that the Rebbe believes, at least this person for sure, is really a chassid, whether he acknowledges it or not. And the Rebbe speaks about it. What is a chassid? He speaks about lefnim meshur sadin. In another letter, this is volume 5, Igros Kedesh, chapter 80, page 86, also the same page, interestingly. The letters there, 22nd, Chav Beis Kislev Tovshin Yud Beis. But mine al bakashase, help from Veren chassid, to help you become a chassid. So the Rebbe says that the Rabbeim already solu sadera, they already paved the way. And that's through learning Chassidus and the anhag of darkei Chassidim and the behavior of the ways of Chassidim. And the Iker Reibenzich tradition Chassidim. To Reibenzich means to hang out with them, to osmosis, to incubate with Chassidim. Shimusha means that you pick up certain nuances. You pick up the lachluchis, as they say, the moisture, the between the lines. This is a short letter. And then finally, a third letter I want to refer you to is a letter in volume 4, page 258, where the Rebbe speaks about explaining why he said by Fabrengen, Chav Dalad Nisan Tovshin Yud Aleph, looks like Achrosh Pesach, the Rebbe said by Fabrengen, L'chaim de tatos zayin a chosid begoli, a chosid behelem is a shein, kinder chsidim hoter, aber as zayin a chosid begoli, vet kenen zuhelfen zayin kinder zu zayin chsidim begoli. That was the words the Rebbe used by Fabrengen. And the Rebbe explains it at length. So that's page 258 in volume 4 of Igros Kedesh. You could all look it up. Why am I mentioning all of this? Because you have here also Isis and words of the Rebbe about what it means to be a chassid and how one becomes a chassid. But I have to say, all these letters are earlier years. When you look at the Shlichus and you combine all of it, it's very, very clear that in our generation, mitzvahs hador is to be a shliach. A shliach is not just a card-carrying member invited to the kinnus hashluchim, etc. A shliach is someone whose soul came down to this earth for what? To spread Chassidus, to spread Torah, spread Yiddishkeit, to Jews in their way and to non-Jews through tzedek and yesher, sheva mitzvahs and so on. That is, that you feel that's your primary purpose on this earth. Now, you could say we know so many Chassidim, so many people, Lubavitchers, born Lubavitchers, who live in the community, live in many communities, and that they don't see that as their primary purpose. We'll discuss this in the next episode more, especially, as I said, in these weeks. And we have to discuss what that means. And what did they get educated wrongly? Is there something missing? What should they do at this situation? And obviously, every one of us who's receptive to hearing can hear things, and we could always grow. And there's no such person that is already there. Nobody's there. We're all looking to grow. So this is not a matter of spelling out some are first-class citizens, some are second-class citizens. The Rebbe told us the Shlichus of our generation, and in the coming weeks we will discuss about it. And we'll also discuss a campaign that we're going to initiate at the Meaningful Life Center, which is Share the Rebbe, Share My Rebbe, ways that we can share the Rebbe with others. Because at the end of the day, the best way to prepare for Gimel Tammuz, to honor it, is honoring the Rebbe. The Rebbe is his Torah. Anon nafshis ksovis Yehovis. The Rebbe placed himself in his Torah. His etzem is there. And by sharing the Rebbe's Torah, the Rebbe's approach to things, which hopefully this series helps do as well, taking the Rebbe's ideas, his methodology, obviously based on the Chassidus of all the generations, based on Torah of all generations, and applying it to our lives, this is the way we bring the Rebbe alive. The Rebbe in his methodology, his approach, his philosophy, his vision, both meichin in intellect, in midas, emotions, we spoke about davening, and obviously in action. When we align our cognitive and our emotional and our action-oriented lives, that's the goal, which is cognitive conditioning, emotional conditioning, and action conditioning, all aligned to a kavanah. The kavanah is to bring Mashiach. The kavanah is through Yafutza Ma'anesecha Chutza, spreading Chassidus. That's the primary objective. Everything else is secondary. That is the essence of what the Rebbe wanted of us. That's the essence of what a Lubavitcher is, what a Chassid is. And it's not a maflega thing. If somebody's doing that and they don't call themselves a Lubavitcher or don't follow every Chabad custom, they may be doing more than those that follow customs and not following the prime objective. With this, I'd like to conclude and bid everyone a very good week, a week of Chassidus week, a Chassidic week, a dedicated week to the kavanah, to the purpose. You've been listening to MyLife, Chassidus Applied, episode 18. So until next Sunday, everyone have a good week. Sunday 8 to 9. We will resume with episode 19. Thank you.